right, welcome to the first ever Lutheran Communicators Digital Conference. My name is Seth Hinz. It's my pleasure to welcome you today. I'm just thrilled that this conference is happening and just so thankful that you're spending this afternoon with us and learning about church communication. I'm excited about all the speakers we have and for all the information that's going to be shared today. This conference was born out of an idea that came up in the Lutheran Communicators Facebook page. It's something that started in 2013. Just as a little chat between some people that were Lutheran and communicating in the church, and it's kind of grown from there. And I've just been excited to kind of do this thing for a few years now. So to have Peter, Frank, and Andrew Osborne working with Concordia Technology Solutions to kind of help make this thing happen, I'm very thankful to those guys. And so I guess the reason we're here, we're facing several new realities in church communications, and I think we're all kind of aware of that. You know, the speed at which we're communicating is increasing. It's kind of unrelenting at this point. You feel like you always have to be pushing stuff out and creating new content and making it great. The number of platforms that we have to use to reach people is increasing. Are we texting? Are we Facebooking? Are we tweeting? So what we're doing here is we're going to step back from the day-to-day grind of what we're going through and hopefully evaluate the opportunities that your church has in church communication. And explore some new tools and some new strategies where we can start looking at, from a higher level, at the things that we're doing every day, and then go back down to the nitty-gritty of it and really find what's going to be effective for us and our church as we try to reach the community around us. And so that's why we're here. This is specifically for kind of churches in the Lutheran context. So this is geared towards you. If you're here for that and you're communicating with your community, this is for you. So thank you for being here with us today. One new reality we're facing is the role of church communicator. And whether you have that position at your church or you are the pastor or a volunteer and you are doing church communications, the actual need for that position is growing, and we kind of want to evaluate that today. And so that's why we brought on today Evan McBroom. Evan is joining us from Indianapolis, Indiana. He's the founder and chief culture officer at an organization called Fishhook. And Fishhook partners with churches and ministries to provide creative services and innovative communication strategies. At any one time, they are kind of working with 30 to 40 churches. They've worked with hundreds of churches since their founding in 2003, and we couldn't be more excited to have Evan sharing with us today. So we're going to welcome Evan. Evan, thank you for being here.
Seth, thanks so much for having me here, and just so excited. Not only do I love Lutherans, and we've had the opportunity to work with a number of great churches from your tribe, but also I love Michigan. Really, favorite states are Michigan and Colorado. We spend probably half of our vacation dollars in and around Higgins Lake and up and down Lake Michigan's great cities. So super excited to be here today. And what we're going to do is we're going to go look at some of the emerging trends. Emerging trends was kind of my assignment on this. And what I did is I turned to our team and said, guys, in each of your areas, whether it's web, design, strategy, what are the trends you're seeing? And so this is more than just my input. You've got the input of several folks. And so I'm excited to share that with everybody. And I think I'll share my screen. We'll go to my slides, if that's good with you, Seth.
Sounds great. Thanks, Evan.
All right, you bet. So one of the things that I said as we were planning this is, you know, sometimes it's hard to think about, can I pay attention to the emerging trends when I'm also still feeling kind of so far behind the times? And I know that for a lot of church communicators, that's where they feel. They feel like, yeah, there's stuff going on up at the front, but they're somewhere back farther, and they're working through, you know, trying to catch up. And so what we want to do is talk about emerging trends, so maybe people can kind of leapfrog ahead. I kind of think of it like in a lot of third world countries, they skipped landline phones. They went straight to mobile. So maybe that's something that we can kind of do here today. As we look at some trends. Let me go back. There we go. So I would say the first trend is that we are looking at more and more churches saying strong communications has to be a bigger priority. More and more church leaders are kind of declaring it unacceptable to be behind the times. And I mean, I would say that this conference here today is a great reflection of that. The thought of a few years ago being able to have so many churches dialing in to an online conference, I'm not sure if it would have happened, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but look at today. Many churches are saying we just can't anymore be behind the times, and we have to make current practices a must. And I think what we're seeing is smaller and smaller churches arriving at that conclusion. Another thing is, in terms of making strong communications a bigger priority, is that communications traditionally has been seen as an administrative function. And we're seeing more and more churches saying communications now has to be a key aspect of discipleship making, because when we communicate with strong strategies and we have discipline and restraint about how we're communicating, we can actually lead people to take spiritual next steps. And so I think we've seen kind of three eras of communications. The first era, and your church may be in one of these right now. The first era was every man for himself. Every man, every woman, every ministry, do your best, just kind of duke it out and get your information out, get your stuff in the bulletin, but you have free access to reach everyone. I think then the pendulum swung to kind of a command and control. The idea that a communication director would rule over everything and nothing would go to anyone unless it went through that person. And I would say now what we're seeing is this is a team sport. Strong communications is a team sport where there's a strong leader, and that leader is harnessing and using the main communication tools, and then helping each ministry figure out how do they release their message through various smaller communication channels. So thinking about that strong leader, the next trend that I would say is that smaller and smaller churches are investing in staff of some kind, in a leader. And so small churches are investing in training for current staff. They're adding part-time communications leader or seeking skilled and experienced volunteers. And so where this maybe has traditionally fallen on an administrative assistant or a receptionist, which has been awesome, now we're saying, you know what, we need to empower and train those people with new skills and new experience. Again, today's conference is a great example of that. Or we need to bring in additional people to support our communication efforts. I think we're seeing mid-sized churches that have had a director of communications making a huge shift that we believe is critical. And that shift is from doer to planner strategist, where a few years ago, the director of communications primary role might be they're a great graphic artist or a great writer. What we're seeing is they'll figure out how to get that stuff done, but their primary role should be planner strategist. And for those who are serving currently in that role and are more of a doer, we would encourage you to talk with your leaders about, how do I shape this job? How do we shape this job so I have more time to plan and more time to think about strategy? I think what we're seeing in mega churches is the role of director of communications is now evolving into pastor of communications, that this is a pastoral level role. And that person is primarily a shepherd and a strategist, a shepherd to a team and a strategist and leader at the executive level. And also those pastor of communications, or even in some areas, director of communications, they're starting to hire specialists. And those specialists focus on roles including social media, video, graphic design, web development. And we're seeing in very large churches, those paid positions increasing, and in mid-sized churches, those are being done by volunteers. And then this is a shift that we've been calling for a long time, and we're seeing it more and more often in place. And that is that the communication leader, whether it's an administrative assistant, whether it's the director of communications or a pastor of communications, this person sits at the highest leadership table. I once heard a communication director say, in my role, I kind of have to play investigative reporter. I'm not included in the pastor's staff meeting. So after the meeting, I have to ask, hey, what happened? And what do we need to communicate? And no one is really in that meeting thinking about communications. And so we believe that even if it's just a listening role, that that the communication leader should be at that highest level. All right, let's go to the next one. I would say the next trend that we're seeing is less church-wide messaging. And so going down to this last bullet, what we've seen a lot of times is the communication strategy sounds something like this. Get your information to the church office by Thursday at noon, and it'll get in the bulletin. And I would just say that's not a strategy. That is a practice and a tactic, but it's what that does is that just creates just too much of a volume of lots of small events being promoted in a huge channel. I think of the bulletin as a channel to everyone. And so what we're seeing is churches really focusing on less sharing with the big audience. They're putting in restraint on what are we going to put in our main communication vehicles. And they're showing restraint so that the main messages get the most attention. And then they're working with each ministry to come up with a greater use of smaller channels. And so I think about Facebook, other social media, smaller little postcard campaigns, little do-it-yourself communication campaigns for individual ministries. So if you hear the phrase that sounds something like, get your information to the church office on Thursday by noon, and we'll get it in the bulletin, it's time to have some really hard conversations about what are your communication priorities. All right. I would say a next trend is that we're really in a season of ongoing website improvements. I just got a call from a ministry yesterday. They said, it's been 4 years since we updated our website. Do you think it's time? And I would say more than time. I would say that the length of time between major website either refresh or relaunches is narrowing and narrowing and shortening and shortening. And so those time between major website relaunches is shortening, and there's a real emphasis on always fresh and current content. And also we're seeing a move to content on the website that is helpful for people's lives, whether people are attending your church or not. And we'll talk about sermons and lengths of sermons online in just a moment, but we're seeing churches start to say, hey, we've got a lot to offer people, whether they're Christ followers or not. We have a lot to offer to help them in their life. And maybe we can get some of this online in content, in our blogs, in our videos, and develop a relationship with people online before they even contemplate looking for a church. The next thing I would say we're seeing is more churches focusing on watching their analytics and adjusting their website for increased engagement. And I'm pretty sure someone's going to talk about that later on in the day, that there's the opportunity to, instead of just launch your website and leave it alone for 3 years, you make little adjustments every month or two, and you watch those analytics and you figure out what can we do to increase engagement. And as you experiment with things, you see what works. Of course, live streaming of worship services, I would say what the trend is smaller churches are getting into that. So that's been a trend for larger churches for some time. And then I would say the last, in terms of website, is that online giving and online registration is absolutely a must. That we're seeing more and more churches that when they step forward and get a strong online giving platform, giving goes up. And when they have online registration, more people sign up for events. And that, both of those items are when I talk about communications having a strong tie to spiritual next steps, being able to register online is really critical for someone taking a next step to join the women's conference, go to a youth event, sign up for a recovery group, etc. So, all right, next trend is I think we're seeing a repackaging of sermons for online presentation that is different from the whole sermon. When you think about most churches that post their sermons online, whether it's video or audio only, it's usually the whole thing. I mean, they may or may not have the music, depending on their copyright, what copyright license they have. But in essence, they're typically posting 25, 35, 40-minute sermons. That is awesome for the highly engaged, highly connected church member or church goer who has missed a week or missed a couple weeks or has moved to another town and wants to listen to a whole sermon. But I mean, if we just each look at our own lives, time is tight. More and more, again, I just encourage you to look at your own life on this. We read, if something is too long to read, we won't read the whole thing. If something is too long to watch, when we click on a video and we look down at the bottom, and before we even click start, we see how long the thing is. It was like, oh, that thing's 6 minutes long. I'm not watching that. So the idea that someone who is checking out your church or starting to investigate church, that they would watch an entire 30-minute sermon, that's a really high barrier. And so what we're seeing is churches wisely cut down the length of the sermon to more of either a highlights or a particular point they're trying to make within the sermon. And that someone could watch a 3 or a 5 or a 7-minute segment and really glean something that will help them in their life, and will give them a sense of the preaching at your church, and that this shorter sermon is really kind of more bite-sized consumption, and that would increase engagement. And this would also support what would be called a content strategy to engage audiences with the part, not the whole. So again, this is the idea that we're going to put helpful content online that helps people with their lives, whether they're attending your church or not. All right, let's talk about some trends in Facebook. Facebook, I would say we really would call it a preferred channel, but it's always changing. And many churches have struggled over the years to make effective use of Facebook. For many, it's been just kind of a promotional billboard, and they scratch their head like, why can't we get comments? Why can't we get more people engaged? And it's that effective use. And again, I believe this will be talked, and there's lots of resources online to help you figure out how do you, develop an editorial calendar? How do you go for engagement? How do you talk about more than just the next event? More and more churches, I would say, are figuring it out. They're experimenting. They're trying things. They're bringing in people who are just, they have maybe as a volunteer, this volunteer has a great ongoing Facebook presence personally, and they're allowing that volunteer to come in and lead the Facebook or other social media efforts. I would say the other thing about Facebook is this is a trend. When you think you have it figured out, it changes. And so I'm all the time asking a couple people on our team who keep up to this on more than I do to say, hey, is this something we need to start doing? Is this something we need to start doing? And I would say that you need to look for that person in your own life. So I'm not a digital native. I'm 52 years old. And so while I'm very active in all this, this was not my native language. So it's really important for all of us to find what I would just call would be a digital Sherpa. Find someone who is very likely younger, very likely they're a digital native, and you have that person come alongside and help you figure things out as they change. I think we're also seeing a big trend in that leaders are being more and more selective about their various social media channels. And what I mean by that is, I think there was a pressure earlier on. We have to be on Facebook. We have to be on Twitter. We have to be on Instagram. We have to go figure out Snapchat. And I think what we're seeing is go where your audience is. We're seeing leaders say, I'm going to go, we just don't have a lot of people on Twitter. Well, then don't bother trying to create a Twitter audience. If your people are on Facebook, go there. If your youth group is on Instagram, go there. So we would just say that I think we're seeing a trend that more and more church leaders are picking a channel or two and focusing on what they can do really well. All right, I think the next trend, this is super exciting for me. In my early career, I worked in a big video production house. So, these days, you, me, and $10,000, and we can be in the video production business in a big way. Back in the days when, before video equipment got so affordable, it would take tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to get into the video business in a big way. Well, people are literally carrying around production studios in their pockets. Mobile platforms now have incredible cameras, good audio, even editing software. And so you can use this production studio that's in your pocket for an incredible opportunity to tell stories and to create promotional videos. And because people are consuming so much mobile video online, it's acceptable. It used to be there were like two qualities. There was what professionals made, and then there was, the junk people made on a VHS camera at the home. And there was a huge difference. And now it's so acceptable. Watching video online is so acceptable that the quality, you need good sound and, some good production basics, but you can produce actual legit testimony videos, promotional videos, small group curriculum, literally on a mobile phone. There's no crew to have. There's no scheduling. And again, so lots of ways to use the video. And I would say this is the other, and this next piece may be kind of a hard pill, and it's also probably, would create a lot of debate. But I would say video-free worship spaces, in other words, sanctuaries that have no ability to play video, are, not a dying breed. They are a dying breed. That you no longer. Well, here's an example. This weekend I was in a church. Actually, this was at some colleagues of mine were at Cornerstone Lutheran Church in Indianapolis, or in Carmel, and they have two. I'm going to point this out. They have two worship services, one in a space that doesn't have video and another in a space that does have video. And a ministry opportunity was presented, and the response in the room that had video was so much higher. And it's just an incredible illustration to say, so many people are like, video just has the power to communicate in a way that nothing else can. And so I would just say, if you're in a space that doesn't have video in the worship space, if you're in a church that doesn't have video in the worship space, the ability to present and play videos, that's something that really should be a big conversation. Okay, the last thing on video, and that is that Facebook is giving preference to more and longer videos. Our research is showing that they are probably heading toward something that would be online video, maybe not exactly like Netflix, but the way the algorithm works is they are rewarding video more than pictures, and they are rewarding longer format. And so that means it's being pushed up into people's feeds higher. And so I think that's an important thought to move towards. All right, so what are some next steps? Because that was a lot in 18 minutes, 7 big trends. I would say, have hope. And as I was talking the other day with someone, how do you eat an elephant? Well, you do it one bite at a time. So have hope. And I believe that as we look at what's going to be presented the rest of the day, we'll go from, oh my gosh, that was a lot, to, wow, there's some real answers. I'm going to direct you to just a few resources real quick. First, there's a staffing download for the staffing conversation. There's a job description that we've created that is probably not perfect for your church, but it could be a good starting place for the communication director's role, whether that's staff or volunteer, and whether you have that official title or not. So I would encourage you to download that. The next is, I talked about the need for training. We have a program called TeamSpeak that right now, this is 6 training modules around communications. And right now we have it made available to churches of under 350 in weekly worship attendance or less. There's a grant process that churches can apply for to get that program for free. And so there's a limited amount of that, but I would encourage you to check that out. Next would be some recommended reading. Kim Meyer is a well-known author in the topic of church communication, and her book, Less Chaos, Less Noise, is really must read. And then finally, we offer a bunch of absolutely free resources at fishhook.us, and we would love for you to download those and digest and use and make the most kingdom impact out of those resources as you can. And that would bring us to a close on 7 big trends in church communications. Seth?
Awesome, Evan. That was fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. That was a lot to take in. Evan gave us some great information there. Just a quick reminder that Concordia Technology Solutions is going to have everything up on their website following, including this presentation. So, Evan, thank you very much for everything you just gave us there to chew on.
You bet. I'm going to hang out for a while longer because I want to hear Bill and Peter, if that's all right.
For sure. All right. Sounds great.